It seems to be the end of an era here in Dallas, Texas. On today's show, we'll talk about Ben Bishop and Anton Khudobin and the sadness of potentially never seeing them play for the Dallas Stars ever again. And then we also have a game today to talk about the Dallas Stars looking to get back to their winning ways against their rivals, the St. Louis Blues, tonight. We'll give you a full preview of that and a little bit more on today's episode of Locked On Stars.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, and you are locked on the Dallas Stars on this Tuesday, December 14th. And maybe a little bit of a sad day because we're starting the show off kind of on a sad note, talking about the departure of two beloved Dallas Stars both of them players, words are hard, but players that have meant a lot to this organization, players that both played goalie for this organization. One of them, for sure, we will never see play for the Dallas Stars again, in Ben Bishop, and the other, Anton Khudobin. There's a potential that we could see him play for the Stars again, but not very likely. We'll get into that, and then a little bit later in the show, we will talk about tonight's matchup between the Dallas Stars and the St. Louis Blues. But before we do that, I do want to take a moment and say thank you for stopping by today's episode of Locked On Stars. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast at. It's absolutely free. You can do that on YouTube. You can also do that on your favorite podcasting platform. And also be sure to leave a review if you like what you hear. But without any further hesitation, let's get into some of the storylines surrounding the team today with Ben Bishop and Anton Khudobin departing from the Dallas Stars. We'll start with Ben Bishop, who it came out over the weekend after his tough outing in the AHL with the Texas Stars, giving up 8 goals, that he was going to meet with the media on Tuesday, which is today. And then it just kind of came out. Obviously, I think people knew it was coming, but Ben Bishop officially announcing today to the media, meeting with the media, that he is retiring from the National Hockey League. And what a career it was for Ben. 413 NHL games played with St. Louis, Ottawa, Tampa Bay, Los Angeles, and Dallas. 222 wins, 33 shutouts, 2.32 games allowed, goals average allowed. Wow. I should have written that out instead of putting that as the abbreviation. Goals allowed average, and then a .921 save percentage. Again, absolutely incredible career for Ben Bishop. Obviously, hate that it has ended this way for him. Wish that it could have ended on a little bit more of a positive note. But I mean, that's just the cruelty of sports sometimes. We talked yesterday with JD Young of Locked On Sharks about how hockey can be a cruel sport in the sense that you do everything right in a game and still lose. And sometimes it's cruel in the sense of you have a great career. You're nominated for the Vezina Trophy several times. You're an all-star. You lead your team to the playoffs and go on deep playoff runs. And sometimes your career ends in your last game played. You give up 8 goals in the AHL coming off knee surgery. It doesn't seem fair. Certainly to me, and I'm sure to many of you who love Ben Bishop and love what he's done for this Dallas Stars team, it certainly doesn't seem fair, but that's just unfortunately how life goes sometimes. And hopefully he is able to enjoy retirement. Obviously, like I said, a long career, 413 NHL games is nothing to scoff at. I hope, that he's still able to stay connected to the NHL world because the NHL is better with him a part of it. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Not that I've met him personally, but just any interaction I've seen with him in the media. Never really heard too many complaints against Ben Bishop. Always smiling, always nice to the media. Great guy that will be deeply missed by the Dallas Stars, and I'm sure many others in the NHL because he had a lot of teammates. But also a guy that he shared the crease with from 2018 to 2020, Anton Khudobin. It was announced yesterday that the Dallas Stars are placing him on waivers. So he has until today, Tuesday at 1 p.m. to clear waivers. And at the time of recording this episode, I believe, around 9 o'clock on Monday night, nothing has come to fruition yet. Of course, with my luck, by the time I get this edited and published, something may have already happened. But he has until 1 p.m. on Tuesday, today, when you're hearing this, to clear the waivers. And he was waived, according to Jim Nill, GM of the Dallas Stars, to clear up a roster spot. And because he wants Dobby to play more games, whether that's with another NHL team or with the Texas Stars in the AHL. Anton Khudobin has not played for the Dallas Stars since November 18th. And I believe he's only played 7 games this season. Definitely having a very, very down year. I know that his save percentage is sub 0.9. So just obviously not what we're used to seeing from him. But similar to Ben Bishop, Anton Khudobin is getting up there in age. His better days clearly behind him. But like I said to open the show, clearly the end of an era here in Dallas as far as in the crease for the Stars, between the pipes. From 2018 to 2020, Dobby and Bish absolutely dominated the opposition every time they were on the ice. Former host of the Locked On Stars podcast, Josh Clark, actually retweeted a graphic yesterday that was sent out from then Fox Sports Southwest, but now Bally Sports Southwest, from January 15th, 2020. That just had, a picture of Ben Bishop and Anton Khudobin with their stats up to that point in the 2019-2020 season, boasting how good that they really were that season before everything got shut down. Obviously, January 15th, about 2 months before everything got shut down to the COVID-19 pandemic. But at that time, Ben Bishop had a 16-9-3 record, .390 save percentage, second in the NHL at the time, a 2.23 goals allowed average, which was fourth in the NHL. And at the same time that season, Anton Khudobin had 11-6-1 record, .932 save percentage, which was first in the National Hockey League, and a 2.13 goals allowed average, which was second in the NHL. Debatably the best tandem in the league at the time. And I remember even as the season was getting shut down, the Stars were kind of finding their footing, having a pretty nice season, definitely not near the top of the NHL at the time, but obviously did well enough to, once the season got restarted, to make the round robin for the Western Conference. So they were having a really good year, the Stars were, and Ben Bishop and Dobby were definitely a part of that. And I think the things that I'll really just remember them for, especially recently, just because, these were some big moments in Dallas Stars history that happened in the past few years, is just how these guys came up for the team in the playoffs, especially in 2019 and 2020. Ben Bishop was really the reason for any Stars success in the 2019 playoffs. He had a .933 save percentage and a 2.22 GAA. And obviously, I feel like it's fair to say that the offense let him down in that Western Conference semifinals series against St. Louis. Dallas had a 3-2 lead at one point in that last game, Game 7, ending in double overtime with a score of 2-1. Obviously, a very defensive match, but still disappointing to see that the Stars, couldn't go farther, because I think if they had beat the Blues, obviously the Blues went on to win the entire Stanley Cup playoffs that season. Sky could have been the limit for the Dallas Stars, and I think Ben Bishop could have really carried them all the way to the Stanley Cup final, if not to the championship. The history and trajectory of the Dallas Stars could look very different, but that's a huge what if. But still, Ben Bishop clearly great in that 2019 playoff run against Nashville, against St. Louis. Great performance, one of the best performances we've seen from a goalie in the playoffs. And then, of course, who can forget in recent memory Anton Khudobin in the 2020 playoffs in the Edmonton bubble, the heart and soul of that Dallas Stars team, without a question. Just being loud and vocal in the locker room, but also just letting his play on the ice reflect his passion for the game, reflect just what Dallas Stars hockey is all about. And that's, working hard and getting those nice grinded out wins despite the odds being stacked against them. Anton Khudobin had a .917 save percentage in the bubble back in 2020 when the Dallas Stars went to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1999. Truly, truly incredible to see. Again, hate that if this is the end for Anton Khudobin and he never plays another game for the Dallas Stars. Wish it could have ended a little bit better. Wish it could have at least ended, if he was maybe playing a little bit better this season and he gets to stick around with the team if they make the playoffs and he gets to make one last playoff push with the boys. But it's looking like that's not going to happen. We might see him in the AHL, but wouldn't surprise me if we see him go to a team that's looking for a second goalie. Certainly don't think he'll be playing first goalie reps anywhere in the NHL. But a guy, that I think he can fill a backup spot on a roster somewhere. So we will see what happens. Again, of course, as the time that you're listening to this, something may have happened with Anton Khudobin, but I just feel like kind of the general consensus is that his time as a Dallas Star has really come to an end. And I think, now we've, had this whole debacle if you will, with Dallas Stars goalies this season, of talking about who's going to be the starter, who's going to be backup, who's going to be on the NHL roster, who's going to be on the AHL roster. And that seems to be answered now. It seems like Braden Holtby and Jake Ottinger are the guys that are going to be responsible for helping this team throughout the rest of the season and hopefully help carry them to the postseason. And those are two guys that I very much trust as of right now. We'll see how my feelings on those two fluctuate throughout the season, but very excited that, the Dallas Stars seem to have found their identity in the crease and seem to have found some consistency, appointing Holtby and Ottinger as the guys that are being trusted to help this team find some success. And success is something they very much need right now. And they'll be looking to get back on track and get back to their winning ways tonight with their matchup against their old friends, the St. Louis Blues. But before we start talking about that matchup, do want to take a moment and say thank you to some of the sponsors of today's episode. The first of those being Omaha Steaks. The holidays are around the corner, and finding the perfect gift is tricky. Omaha Steaks makes it easy to send friends and family an unforgettable gift guaranteed to be loved. Go to omahasteaks.com and enter NHL into the search bar to order the perfect gift package for $99.99. You'll get 24 entrees like the world famous bacon wrapped filet mignons, chicken breasts, sides, desserts, and so much more. When you use the code NHL, you'll also get an additional 8 Omaha Steak burgers for free with your order. We've all heard the reports about shortages and shipping delays, so don't wait. Order the perfect gift package today at omahasteaks.com, and you'll get 8 free burgers when entering the code NHL. Achieve gifting greatness with Omaha Steaks. Incredible flavor, incredible value, 100% guaranteed. Go to omahasteaks.com and use the keyword NHL today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Boost Mobile. You listen to podcasts for the power of knowledge. You switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money. Get 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line and a free 5G phone when you switch, so you can get the latest episodes of your favorite podcasts, all on one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save with Boost Mobile. Free phone limited to new customers and 1 per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offers and coverage not available everywhere or for all phones or networks. See boostmobile.com for more details. Moving on to the next segment of today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. Want to take a moment and preview tonight's matchup between the Dallas Stars and the St. Louis Blues. Old friends, old rivals, always a good time when these two teams get together. And the next installment is coming up tonight at the American Airlines Center. And then the next game for the Dallas Stars will be later this week against the Blues in St. Louis at the Enterprise Center. So they'll be seeing plenty of the St. Louis team this week. But the Blues are also coming off a loss similar to the Dallas Stars. The Blues are coming off a 3-2 overtime loss to the Anaheim Ducks. They blew a 2-1 lead at home. Of course, Anaheim playing very, very well this season, as we talked a little bit talked about that yesterday, talking about the Pacific Division being surprisingly competitive and maybe just as competitive to some degree as the Central Division. Speaking of which, the Blues are tied for second in the Central right now with 35 points, tied with the Nashville Predators. And of course, Minnesota still sitting atop the Central Division standings with 39 points. Interesting times for the St. Louis Blues, I might add, just with COVID and injuries. Team leader in points, Jordan Kyrou, has missed their last game with an upper body injury, not with COVID, but an upper body injury from a hit that he received on their Saturday game against the Montreal Canadiens. They played in a back-to-back Saturday and Sunday. Kyrou took a mean hit. I believe it was Suzuki from Montreal that hit him. And he went down in the first period, came back. I think he played about 3 or 4 shifts in the second, and then did not return to the game. Have not been able to read anything or find anything on whether or not he will be good to go in tonight's game, but certainly will be noteworthy if he is not available to play, as, like I said, he's the team leader in points for the St. Louis team, extremely valuable to their offense and just to their game plan as a whole. And even if he is playing, who knows if he's 100% healthy. So really a big storyline to watch is if he plays, how effective will Jordan Kyrou be? And if he doesn't play, how can the Dallas Stars look to exploit the Blues, at least from a defensive standpoint? So certainly be on the lookout for that. St. Louis, like I said, also struggling with COVID a little bit this season and injuries. I believe they've had 7 guys be on the COVID protocol list so far this season. And as of right now, Jordan Bennington, the goalie for the St. Louis Blues, finds himself in that predicament. However, he is nearing his end of his isolation period after testing positive for COVID back on the 2nd, I believe. And the NHL protocol is that you spend 10 days in isolation. And it's obviously been past 10 days since the 2nd. But obviously, he hasn't played hockey in 10 days. So who knows if Jordan Bennington is, up to game shape, if he's ready to go from the get-go, or if he will sit out and practice a little bit before getting back into game action. Not entirely sure who we will see in net for the St. Louis Blues team, either John Gillies or Charlie Lindgren. I imagine those are the guys that have been in the crease for the Blues the past 2 games. Not entirely sure who to be expecting. Again, couldn't find too much on the Blues website or just Blues news, not to be confused with Blues Clues whenever preparing for this episode. So be another interesting storyline to follow, as if we see Bennington in net somehow, will he be prepared to play a full game after missing, about a week and a half out with COVID? Also could not find, I don't think it was ever released if Bennington had symptoms. So if he's actually feeling sick, that'll be interesting to watch. Or if we have a guy that doesn't have a lot of play time in the NHL this season in the crease, can the Dallas Stars look to exploit that as well? And another point of interest as far as injuries go, St. Louis has placed forwards Robert Thomas and Braden Shin on IR and David Perron on long-term IR. So those are 3 forwards for the St. Louis Blues team who are now on injured reserve, and Perron being on long-term IR. Another thing to be on the lookout for. It just looks like that this St. Louis Blues team is a little bit shorthanded and seems to be going through a little bit of roster struggles this season, similar to how Dallas was last season, similar to how several teams were last season. But I know, you listening, how how much the Stars struggled with COVID and injuries last season. Seems to be getting to the Blues a little bit right now. But despite all that, they seem to be doing very, very well. Like I said, second place in the division, competing with Nashville, competing with teams like Colorado, and still, in the hunt for that top spot in the division at this point in the season. So still a dangerous team. Not saying that Dallas is guaranteed to win because of the shorthandedness of this Blues roster, because as we'll talk about in a minute, Dallas is facing some roster issues of their own, and also just always competitive when these two teams get together. Doesn't matter the circumstances, just one of those matchups that you love to watch just because of the bad blood between these two teams and how competitive things can get. So that's kind of how the St. Louis Blues stand right now before tonight's matchup. In just a moment, I'll go through some of my predictions and overall thoughts, final thoughts before tonight's matchup. But before we do that, I want to take a moment and say thank you to another sponsor of today's episode, and that is Stance. Founded in 2009, Stance Apparel represents a radical renovation of socks, underwear, and active apparel. With a sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity, Stance brings an atypical aesthetic alongside some of pop culture's hottest collaborators for the ultimate in style and self-expression. Because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are and how you feel. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, that those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off your first purchase. Use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. Moving on to the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Stars. Want to take a moment and give my final thoughts and predictions for tonight's matchup between Dallas and St. Louis. A huge game for both teams looking to avenge losses. Dallas looking to avenge 3 losses in a row, looking to avoid dropping 4 straight, which they've only done one other time this season, back from October 25th to November 2nd, when they lost to Columbus, Vegas, Ottawa, and Winnipeg. And that was just a brief moment before the Dallas Stars kind of started to find their footing, winning those games against Philadelphia and Detroit, and then obviously dropping that game to Minnesota and then going on the win streak. Hopefully it won't take Dallas dropping 4 in a row again to find their footing and get back on track and playing the hockey that we know that they're capable of playing. But, it could very well could happen, but I don't anticipate that happening. I think that everything leading up to this game points to a big night from this Dallas Stars team, if they're able to come out sharp and if they are prepared, which I think they will be. They haven't played since Saturday. They've been back home. It is difficult, as we know, as we talked about on the show, and just as if you've watched sports, difficult to perform on the road, especially long extended road trips against some good teams. Vegas, a very good team. San Jose, a very good team. Los Angeles, that loss is still frustrating. We won't talk about that, but it's difficult to win on the road, especially on the West Coast, different time zone. But Dallas is playing back at home in front of the American Airlines Center crowd, which they've played very, very well in front of as of late. I believe the win streak at the American Airlines Center is up to 8 games. So the Stars will be looking to extend that to 9, and we'll see if we can keep that win streak going, because that one is still intact. Also, the St. Louis Blues are shorthanded, dealing with a lot of injuries and dealing with some COVID issues. And of course, this is a rivalry game. I don't think there's any extra motivation needed for this Stars team going into this game. I don't think the coaching staff needs to prepare them to, bring the mental edge and bring the intensity to this game. I think the coaching staff just needs to get them prepared for the X's and O's of the game and just leave the intensity and the meaningfulness of this game to the players, because they all know it's Dallas and St. Louis, a rivalry, always, like I said, intense and entertaining when these two teams get together. A lot of bad blood, no love lost between these two teams. Going to be a very, very exciting, probably a very physical game between these two squads. Dallas, like I said earlier, I would mention some of the injury, more sickness type woes that they're experiencing right now. It looks like they will likely be without Rupe Hintz, Alexander Radulov, and Joel Kiviranta due to non-COVID illnesses. That bug, cold, whatever you want to call it, that was going through the locker room last week seems to still be sticking around, rearing its ugly head yet again. If these three guys play, I can't imagine they'll play very much, but I would expect that those three guys are probably not playing, which hurts especially Rupe and Radulov. Even though Radulov hasn't scored a lot of goals this season, he's still been a very, very effective player and made some really, really good plays as of late. And of course, Rupe Hintz, his value to the team, I feel like I can't even put it into words. You guys know, if you've been watching the Stars team play, how valuable he is to this team and to that top line. However, I think since Dallas desperately needs this win to stay in contention in that 2 to 5 spot, the 2 to 5 race, if you will, in this division, because that's kind of where all the competitive teams are right now. And then you, of course, have Minnesota at the 1, but they're quite a bit ahead of everyone else right now. Dallas really needs this win. And so I think despite the shorthandedness of the Stars, if you want to call it that, with only missing 3 guys, 2 of those guys really playing valuable minutes, I think that Dallas gets this win, a really grinded out game 3-2. Would not surprise me to see this game go to overtime. Very excited for this game. I'll be at the game with my brother, which is always a good time. And my prediction, like I said, 3-2 Dallas Stars. Give me an overtime game. I'll go ahead and predict that 3-2 Dallas Stars win in overtime. Joe Pavelski gets the first goal. I think that's going to be huge if he or Robo or anyone on that I don't know who they're going to put in that third spot on the top line. I believe Kiviranta was getting some of those minutes at some point in some practices, but now it looks like he might be sick. So I'm curious to see who gets that third spot on that line with Pavelski and Robo, unless that they get moved around and the whole lineup gets shaken up, because that very well could happen. But I think if Joe or Robo can get the scoring started, that this Stars team is going to feed off that momentum like they did during the win streak, and that they're going to come out of this game with a W, because things tend to go really well when the Stars score first, and really, really well when it comes from one of their guys on the top line. So very, very excited for tonight's matchup. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Locked On Stars podcast wherever you get your podcasts at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Also, be sure to leave a review if you like what you hear. You can also find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE 2_LEWIS. You can also find the show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, as I'll be bringing you a breakdown and reaction of tonight's matchup against the Blues. Hopefully we'll have some really good things to talk about, but we will see you back here tomorrow. Have a great day, Stars fans.